Let's look at some of the highlights of the Congress. When you compare Congress to the British Parliament or other parliamentary systems, in Parliament candidates are selected by the party, not by primaries or caucuses. Parliament selects the Prime Minister, the Chief Executive, and the bureaucrats. Party members vote as a bloc. Their principal work is debating national issues. There's very little power, very little pay as an MP. Congressional candidates, on the other hand, as in the United States, run in primaries or caucuses, and the party doesn't really care about them until they manage to get on the ballot through the primary or the caucus. The result is a body of independent colloquial representatives. They have separation from between themselves and the White House. Their principal work is representation for the folks back home and action for those constituents. They have power. They have high pay, upwards of $160,000 a year in perks. And the parties, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, they can't discipline those members of Congress because Congress is actually a decentralized institution. Members are more concerned with the viewpoints of their constituents back home in their home states and home districts instead of the BC Beltway. Congress members are less concerned with organized parties because they can't be disciplined by those parties. House members are less concerned with White House initiatives. They're more concerned about getting elected again in 2 years. And Congress can afford to be unpopular with the voters because oftentimes members of Congress are incumbents. And staying in Congress is important to them. Incumbency, meaning that those who are already in office have a tremendous advantage when it comes to elections. There's low turnover rates in safe districts. Question is, are incumbents out of touch with constituents? Well, my point is that constituents, it's their job to make sure that members of Congress stay in touch with them. It has been found that state term limit laws on members of the National Congress are unconstitutional. You can't put term limits on them. State legislatures are going to gerrymander districts back in their home states to give the majority party a tremendous advantage. Party unity means that you're going to have more campaign money, you're going to have party workers during a campaign, you have a tremendous advantage as an incumbent. The only way you're going to get probably kicked out of office is in a scandal, or possibly that you've got a third party that manages to split the vote. So the Congress members represent voters, three different viewpoints. Representational view, delegate view in your text, assumes that members vote to please their constituents. Examples would be back in the 50s and the 60s with civil rights and social welfare programs that constituents back home made sure that Congress started voting the way that they felt they should. There's a weak correlation between constituent viewpoint and foreign policy, because quite frankly, constituents back home probably don't understand foreign policy. As a result, senators who are in charge of foreign policy are more representational. They're more representing the nation as a whole. And the question in representational viewpoint is it really possible to understand what the clear opinion is from the constituents back home? An organizational viewpoint says that Congress members vote to please their colleagues, their party leaders, and their party ideology. On minor votes, Congress members are probably going to be influenced by party members. On more major votes, they're going to vote the way of their constituents back home. The attitudinal viewpoint, often called the political view, says that the ideology of a member of Congress is important. They're going to vote their conscience as a liberal or as a conservative, as a Democrat or as a Republican. There's a huge risk to vote against constituent wishes when they think that they know what the folks back home would trust them to vote their attitude. But when the constituents' attitudes and their ideas back home aren't clear, they're going to vote their own conscience. Organization of Congress. You have to have a way of organizing, and it's organized by party. Party organization of the Senate, the President pro tem is the senior most seniority by age or oftentimes as a result by how long they've been in the Senate. They preside over the Senate, but remember in the Senate there are no rules of debate. There's not a lot for a president pro tem to do. The majority and minority leaders are actually the most important members of the Senate. They are going to lead floor debate. The party whips are going to keep leaders apprised of how their membership is looking at voting. They're going to make sure that those who are sitting on the fence start understanding what the leadership would like. The party in the Senate, the majority party, whichever one it might be, the Democratic Steering Committee is going to make the appointments to the standing committees in the Senate. If the Republicans are in the majority, they're going to get the most of the members on those committees, and that is going to be the job of the Republican Committee on Committees. Party structure in the House. Speaker, third in line to the presidency if the vice president or the president should happen to die. The Speaker has tremendous power. Decides who's going to be recognized on the floor because there are rules of debate in the House of Representatives. Rules on whether or not a representative is sticking to the subject of motions that are on debate, the germaneness of motions. Decides which committee bills will go when they're first come into the House. Appoints members to select and special committees. Those members of the House that have helped the Speaker and or towed the party line are going to get the best jobs on the committees. And very important, the Speaker chairs the Rules Committee, which decides how many people are going to be allowed to debate on a bill and the time limits. Majority and minority leaders in the House are going to lead debates. The party whips, just as in the Senate, try to buttonhole those members of the House to make sure they're voting the party line. Caucuses in the House that are very important, the memberships that get together because they have a common cause, the Progressive Caucus made up of moderate members of the House that can go one way or the other as Democrats or Republicans. Blue Dog Democrats are very conservative on economic issues, but very liberal on social issues. You have the Congressional Black Caucus made up of members of the House who are African American. And nowadays you've got a so-called bipartisan internet caucus that keeps track of how best to keep the folks back home informed about what's going on in the House through the internet. Most important thing you need to understand about a Congress member to predict how they may vote or how they did vote is what party they belong to. Because all liberal extremists are Democrats, all right-wing conservatives are Republican, and you really have very few moderates and independents that may be sitting on the edge. The work of Congress is done in committee. Select committees are groups appointed for limited purpose and limited duration, such as Capitol Monuments, the Warren Commission back in John F. Kennedy assassination, Challenger and Columbia disasters, impeachment, trials that may come up for members of the executive branch and judicial branch. Joint committees are members of the House and Senate who are going to get together for questions of statehood, and conference committees to work on bills.